But I mean, right now, like if the Mets bats, if they can hit to where they were, I mean, Sam, we'll start with you this time. Like, where do you think this team's now ceiling is if they can get everything going? I mean, the bullpen, that's something else. I think we're going to have to get into that. But if they can get, like, I think they're on the upward trend with the hitting and you have the starting pitching being really solid. Where do you think this team can end up here?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I don't think like this hitting doesn't have to be tremendous. They have to be good enough because we just talked about how good the starting pitching is, and obviously they're waiting to get guys back there. So that's my thought process with this hitting is that I mean, sure, they've been struggling a lot lately. You look at a guy like Conforto and obviously in a very big slump, and that's a huge issue. And then even Lindor and Alonso, like you said, Alonso seemed to, big sac fly there. That was important. I expect Alonso and Lindor to get going. I don't expect them to have a bad season. I think those two guys are incredibly talented hitters, both of them. Those are the guys in the lineup that really need to get going, but I don't think it's a huge pressure. I think they definitely will. Conforto seems to be in a big time slump, which is why I'm a little bit less optimistic with him. I think eventually guys get out of those, but in baseball, I mean, a slump is so difficult and chances are it's, almost 90% mental, it seems like, and very little physical there. So that's a big issue with this lineup here. But like I said, I think just talking about this Mets team, it comes down to the fact that they don't have to be great. This lineup does, we're going to talk about the Yankees in a little while. I think their lineup has a ton of pressure on them because of the starting pitching and how not so good that is, how shaky that's been. Their lineup has to be tremendous. But for the Mets, their lineup needs to be good, obviously. If you're gonna win the division or go into a wild card, you have to be good. But you don't have to be great. That lineup doesn't have to be perfect. I expect Lindor and I expect Alonso to get going. Those are two big pieces for them. Nimmo has been very good. That's certainly a positive for this team. I think this lineup will be good enough. I'm not too worried about them. I'm relatively optimistic just because of how you can fall back on that starting pitching, especially come October, because you mentioned that too. I think the bullpen is big in October, and that's obviously this team's biggest concern. We'll get into that. But starting pitching is also very huge. And if you can have these guys going really late in games, that can make up for kind of a shaky bullpen, I feel like. And I'm just thinking about maybe a potential wild card matchup, Mets Padres, just looking down, way down the road. Obviously, it's super early, but that's, I feel like, a matchup everybody is super excited about and would love to see. DeGrom in a one-game wild card against the Padres, against anyone, you got to like the Mets' chances. So for me, that's just like, I think this lineup will be good enough in terms of offensively, but it all comes down to that starting pitching, and that's going to be the make or break.
Yeah, a lot there. I do agree. I think Padres Mets, I do think we will probably see that. I know it's a big foreshadow looking in the future, but
Huge.
One thing that I do think also, I agree with your point. The lineup just has to be fine, right? You bring in Lindor, he will get going. Pete will get going. It's funny because, the second half of the offseason was all about getting a center fielder, and Brandon Nimmo has been the best hitter on this team, above 400, getting on base every other time. So that's been kind of a fun thing. We'll see if he keeps that up. But the one thing that I don't really agree with is how the bullpen is everything for this team, because you talked about how starters can cover up, a shaky bullpen, but you can have, as DeGrom knows, you can have an amazing start and then it just all unravels once you get taken out of the game. The bullpen is what you need to cover up, bad starting pitching if you have to yank guys early. And especially come playoff time, you need bullpens. You need to go to guys early. You need guys to get outs. And I think the bullpen is the big question mark with this team because rotation's going to be there. The lineup will do enough, but Seth Lugo, probably their most consistent guy out right now. Trevor May, shaky start to him opening day. He kind of blew that game. Betances just kind of fallen out of favor a little bit. He's kind of a non-factor now. And Edwin Diaz, we know him. He has all the stuff in the world, but he's up and down at times. So I do think this bullpen is going to need to get reinforcements. And I do think at the end of the day, it will come down to that and how Rojas manages it, because I think that plays a big role. We've seen in the playoffs, we'll go to the Yankees in a second, but there have been mismanagements of the bullpen and it's cost them momentum. It's costed them series. So I do think the Mets will need to add there if we're talking, big picture. Like if they want to make some real noise, it won't be with this bullpen. But as of right now, I think this Mets team is solid. They're doing enough right now. As you talked about, if you can kind of stay afloat right now, you wait for the reinforcements to come back. It could be scary and they could totally win the East. It is a stacked division, as you talked about. The Braves haven't really got going. I expect them to pick it up, but the Mets have the talent to match the Braves, I think, with that rotation. there's no reason that they would be significantly worse. So stay afloat for now. You'll get the pieces back, add to the bullpen, and I think the Mets will be fine.
Yeah, but bullpen's the big thing. And I mean, I think right now, I mean, they got to wait till Seth Lugo, and then it'll be interesting to see, if he's coming back full healthy. I think then like they're a middle of the line bullpen. They probably still have to add someone late in there. I think Trevor May, he's been the guy that's been a little disappointing. I think Diaz, I think he's pitched well. I think he had one really bad outing where he came in after the ground, but they were already losing. So like, I'm not going to put that much stock into that. Didn't like blow a game, and his stuff is just so good. He's got the new pitch-in song, the walk-up song that I just love.
You love
and
that.
It gets me pumped up. And ever since he's had that song since last year, it's just I'm confident that he's going to get outs. It's just, I don't know why I have that just extra, like he's going to do it. And I'm an Edwin Diaz guy. I'll say it now. He's a good pitcher. His stuff is good, and all the home run stuff, like that'll even out, I think, over time. And he was good with Seattle, and then he had the walk-up song there. Then he came to New York, and they didn't allow him to have it, or whatever happened. He changed it, then wasn't good. Last year he brings it back, and he was dominant, sub 2 ERA. So I'm just saying, there's probably something there. And I think he'll be this team's closer. And I think Lugo will end up being like the 2-inning guy. And May, I thought he was going to be that third guy who can pitch big innings. And his stuff just hasn't looked as electric as it was with, I believe, was the Twins. And, he's a guy that, look, it's so early in the season, but when your stuff doesn't look good, that worries me. And, some of his off-speed pitches have looked flat. And, you have some issues there. So, like, that really concerns me. And then Miguel Castro, he's kind of the other guy who's, a big leverage reliever, and he scares me. I mean, really good stuff, kind of like Diaz light, I like to call him. I think he has really good stuff, gives up home runs, but again, he's kind of, I think, a little wild. Then you have Familia, who's, again, just a complete wild card. But I mean, I think this bullpen's interesting as, if they can get to when Lugo's back. Like right now, you're kind of worried because I don't really have trust in anyone besides Edwin Diaz. And that's just for someone who likes Edwin Diaz. So, I mean, a lot of Mets fans have trust in nobody. And like, that's tough after you're coming from like a DeGrom 7-inning shutout. And then you go from 100% trust to 0 trust. And like, that's tough. And I bet the opposing hitters are like, okay, we have DeGrom out, we have Stroman out. Now we can go hit these guys. That's something that scares me. And losing bullpen games are also like, when you have the lead, bullpen blows it. Those are the worst losses too. So those are the stuff that scares me really first for the Mets. And it's scared me since they didn't really add that much in the offseason, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point there about opposing hitters, especially when a guy like DeGrom or even honestly anyone in this rotation right now, because of how well they're throwing, comes out of the game. It's a huge mental boost, I feel like, for an opposing lineup to think, okay, we know this Mets bullpen doesn't have it. We know that we can get to these guys no matter how good their stuff is. I think baseball is it's an extremely mental sport. You hear that a lot, but these opposing hitters must be kind of licking their chops when they see even Edwin Diaz come into the game, who's, like you said, he's got great stuff and he's pitched very well. He's been dominant at times. And I think that's why kind of fans have been so frustrated with Diaz when he struggles, just because I think Mets fans know how good he can be and how important he can be for this bullpen, which he could very well be the dominant arm in that bullpen, the most reliable arm, because he has the stuff to be. But whether he will be, obviously, is a question. We'll see. Maybe that new walk-up song will help. But I think Trevor May is another guy who I would agree with you, Andrew, has been disappointing, because I think the Mets definitely expected a lot bringing him into a bullpen that they knew wasn't great. And then they kind of needed him to step up, especially when Seth Lugo's been hurt. So that's a piece that I think has really been uncertain and kind of difficult for this Mets bullpen. But Lugo getting back, if Edwin Diaz can kind of figure things out, maybe you get a guy come trade deadline time. I think that would be huge for this Mets bullpen as well. They can piece it together, but unfortunately, I think if you're a Mets fan, you're always going to be worried about this bullpen, no matter what they do. Come playoff time, if the Mets make it, which I'm sure they will, they'll find a way to get in. That bullpen, I think, is just going to be something that they're going to be concerned about, no matter who they get come trade deadline time. But I do expect them to get somebody. And Edwin Diaz can certainly turn into that kind of closer role. And if both those things happen, I think the Mets are in really good shape to certainly, I'd say, make a run here and down the road in October come playoff time.